There's a couple people here. Great. So thank you all for being here for the quarterly Procurement Council meeting. My name is Sean Carroll. I'm the OGS Chief Procurement Officer. This morning we have some housekeeping items before we get to reviewing the minutes. We do have two new appointees to the council. Julie Suarez is the, Julie, are you here? There we go. She is the Associate Dean for Government and Community Relations for the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences for Cornell University. And as a fun fact, I believe that she was integral in creating the seat that she's sitting in now on the Procurement Council when she was working with NYFB. So thank you both for helping to do that and now for filling that seat. We appreciate it. And then also Winifred Schiff. Winifred is right over here. And she has been the Associate Executive Director for Legislative Affairs at the Interagency Council of Developmental Disabilities Agencies since 2008. So she joins us as a new appointee. There are also a number of agency staff folks that have changed over. For Ag and Markets, I believe, is it Lisa? Lisa is right there. Lisa Brooks. For Information Technology, it's Joel Lombardi. For the Office of Mental Health, Dave Russo has changed roles and now is actually with OGS at the Business Services Center. So we just wanted to thank him for his service. And is Daniel Clark? Great. So Daniel is serving in that role now. And for Empire State Development, Pravina Raga, I always do this wrong, I'm sorry. Do you want to pronounce your last name for us? Great, thank you. So with there being that many new faces, just a real quick sort of review. One of the things we did in the packet we distributed is we sent out the basic Robert's Rules of Order materials, and we hope that that's helpful. So this council is constituted to advise the OGS commissioner on all of the advise the OGS commissioner on all matters of state procurement. And so that includes both general policy, and it includes some specific statutory obligations on specific programs. As you can tell from the agenda, one of those programs is the Preferred Sources Program. And there are a number of items regarding that on the agenda. So for new folks, if you have procedural questions about how the mechanics of this process works, please feel free to ask me at any point during the meeting. We're happy to address that. If you have, as we go through the discussion, what we're going to try to do today is be respectful of this evening's holiday. This afternoon at sundown, Rosh Hashanah starts, so we are going to do everything in our power to stick to the schedule that it was published with the agenda today. There's a little bit of room there, and we know that some of these items may require some discussion. But in order to be consistent with that, where we have differences of opinion on the council, we're going to do the best we can to go back and forth between those differences to make sure that all of those issues are heard in the time frame that we have set for the agenda today. So if anybody has questions about that or questions about the process as we go through, please let me know. This committee is constituted under Robert's Rules of Order. For our purposes, there are 21 seats on this council, which means both quorum and majority are 11 under the rules of the way this council is set up. So can I just double check from council's perspective, do we have quorum? Okay. So seeing that we have quorum, we are going to go right into the agenda in the order that it's presented. I'm sorry, does anybody new or otherwise have any questions about any of the opening remarks or any procedural questions before we start? Tom? Oh, sorry, couple technical things. We have left your mics off today. When you speak, if you slide the button forward towards the microphone, it will turn that on. And for the minutes purposes, if you could tell us who you are when you're speaking, so that the folks keeping the minutes can put that in the notes, that would be great. Tom?
Tom Ipshin, Director, University-wide Procurement at SUNY. Sean, we had a question last time around a vote, and I was wondering, and I appreciate the information about the rules of order, but do we ever find out about recusals and abstentions and how they factor into the voting?
So you're present, so you count towards quorum, but they don't count in the positive or in the negative.
Okay.
So votes require, our majority count is 11, so abstentions, recusals, anything other than a yes vote does not count towards an affirmative yes in passing a motion. Okay? All right, so with that said, any other procedural questions before we start? Okay. Then the first order of business is the meeting minutes from May 31st, 2017. Those minutes were distributed fairly shortly, I believe, after the last council meeting. So I hope everybody has had a chance to review it. Are there any comments, changes, concerns? Sean, I know you have one. Would you?
Sean Cullinane. Just for clarity's sake, it says I'm from the Village of Lyndhurst. I'm technically from the Village of Lyndhurst Business Improvement District, two separate entities. So please include Business Improvement District. Thank you.
Got it. So the official minutes will reflect that change, Sean. Anyone else with a change or anything else that they want to adjust from the meeting minutes from May 31st? Okay, seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the May 31st meeting. Is there anybody? So the motion from Sean, the second from Pravina. All in favor of approving the minutes from the May 31st meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any objections? Anyone opposed to approving the minutes from May 31st? Abstentions? No. Okay, great. So it's a unanimous approval of the meeting minutes for May 31st. The next item on the agenda is legislative updates. I am informed by council that there are not any right now. So we are very excited about keeping to the schedule so far. Nice job so far, everyone. The next thing we'd like to do is we've made a commitment to this council to make sure that there are continuing updates about current procurement opportunities, items, new things going on in procurement. And this month, so OGS as staff to the council has added Todd Gartner, who is the new head of the OGS Green Procurement team, to share with us some of what is going on in that space. And so if I could ask Todd to come up and share that with the council, that would be great.
Thank you, Sean. Good morning. My name is Todd Gardner, and I'm a Contract Management Specialist 3 at OGS Procurement Services. Earlier this year, I was assigned to lead a new OGS Green Procurement team, and I was asked to come here and give the council an overview of the new team and our efforts to encourage green purchasing. So for the overview, I'm going to start by giving a brief history of green procurement at OGS and Executive Order 4 that was signed in 2008. And then I'm going to talk about the new team. And that's going to include the goals of the team, our current projects that we're working on, and some of the resources that are available to help purchasers find green products and services. So let's get started. As I mentioned, the new team was established in April of this year, and although this is a new team, it's really part of an ongoing green procurement effort at the state that goes back many years. For example, OGS was one of the first states to offer re-refined motor and hydraulic oil back in the 1990s, and we also have a contract for recycled copy paper that includes paper that has 100% post-consumer content. We also conduct aggregate buys for computers that are EPEAT registered, and we have a green cleaning supplies contract that has products on the contract that are all environmentally preferable. So in 2008, Executive Order 4 was signed, and this executive order officially established a green procurement and sustainability program at the state. And it directed state agencies to incorporate sustainability into operations and established several goals, including the creation of a sustainability program, the reduction of solid waste, increases in recycling rates, the development of green specifications and procurement lists, and the elimination of the purchases of bottled water. And so in order to meet the goal of creating green specifications, almost 50 specifications have been created since 2008. And they're in 4 categories that include electronics and appliances, transportation, office and building supplies, and food service. And some of the specs include, for example, computers, appliances such as washers and dryers, or air conditioners, passenger cars, carpet, cleaning products, lighting, and furniture. And some of the more frequently used specs are probably the computers, the lighting, and the cleaning products. And so also to measure progress towards meeting the goals of the executive order, the order includes reporting requirements. So if you go onto the Green New York website, you can view reports, and they're not annual reports, but there's several reports. They're either annual or biannual. And so although creating specifications is still a main focus of the program, we've started to realize that purchasers need help finding green products, and also that our contracts need to include green products and services for people to buy. So this is where the new green procurement team fits in. The main purposes of the team are to develop green contracts, to help purchasers find green products, and to also identify the benefits and savings of purchasing green. And so although this team is new, it's really an extension of the sustainability work that's been going on since Executive Order 4 was signed. And so to give you an idea of the types of projects that we work on, we're currently developing a contract for environmentally preferable lighting, and we're also working on a contract for photovoltaic systems, which are solar panels. And we're also working with several of the vendors to review their labeling practices for EO4 products. And we're hoping to develop guidelines that will make it easier for purchasers to verify that the products actually meet the EO4 specifications, and to help eliminate possible greenwashing. And we're also working with NASPO to study environmental benefit calculators so we can calculate savings. We've also developed a new Green New York website, which I mentioned earlier, and that website has resources not only for purchasing green, but also for operating green. And if you go onto the Buying Green section of the website, you can find all of the specifications and the annual reports that I mentioned, and also a table which lists commonly purchased green products, and then the sources where they can be purchased. And the source can be either a centralized contract or a preferred source. So our hope is that by having a green procurement team, we can encourage the purchase of green products and services, and we can potentially grow businesses that offer those products and services. And some people say that the green economy has a significant potential for growth over the next several years. So we're hoping that maybe we can encourage some business growth in that area, and also help improve the environment and save government money. So that concludes my overview of the new team. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, Todd. Does anybody have any questions for Todd about the new team? Okay. For the minutes, can we include the website that Todd referenced in the minutes for the council members? That would be great. Okay. So we have 2 voting items on the agenda for today. So there are, the first one is the NYS PSP application for preferred source designation for medicine cups. So again, as I'll try to do throughout the meeting for the what is a surprisingly large number of new people at the meeting, the preferred source process and application process goes on continually. It doesn't just come to the Procurement Council. But the Procurement Council is tasked with if there is any application for discussion, if there are any questions about the application, the Procurement Council has the opportunity to go through those applications and look at them. So there have been a number of other applications approved during the time since the last meeting. The big challenge is always that the Procurement Council really sees the ones that haven't been approved yet. And those are the ones that come as an opportunity for discussion. So I just for the new folks, that the opportunity is here today to understand this application. The way the process works with an application is there are two administrative reviews of the application. One is done by OGS, one is done by Empire State Development, and they are reviewing different things. One is OGS is reviewing sort of compliance for the application, and Empire State Development is reviewing the impact on other businesses in the state. So with that said, does that give everybody who's new a little bit of context? Does anybody have any questions about that generally? Obviously, if there are more questions during the presentations, we'll be happy to take those. The other thing we'd like to try today is we'd like to let each of the speakers that are on the agenda do their presentations, and then all three will be available for questions together. Sometimes the questions get answered if we go through all three of them. So is that okay with the speakers as long as there's an adequate amount of time for questions? Okay, great. So first up is Carrie Laney from the NYS PSP to present the application for medicine cups.
Hello. Thank you, Sean. Hi, my name is Carrie Laney, Executive Director of the New York State Preferred Source Program for People Who Are Blind, or otherwise known as NYS PSP. Thank you to the Procurement Council and to OGS for affording us some time today to talk about our medicine cups application. I'd also like to thank the staff of ESD for making themselves available to discuss their findings and for giving us the opportunity to provide a little additional background information on our program and about employing people who are blind. First, I want to state the Preferred Source Program has been in existence since the 1940s when it was first codified in law. The law established 3 different programs. The program I represent creates direct employment opportunities for New Yorkers who are blind, who are otherwise unemployed at a rate of almost 70%, 7-0. NYS PSP and our 9 affiliated nonprofit agencies across the state are creating new New York State taxpayers and pathways to economic independence. We are not a business, but we directly employ over 450 New Yorkers who are blind, all working in New York State by definition, and all making at least New York State minimum wage. To create employment, we sell goods and services that state and local governments need to purchase for their operation, as directed by state finance law. The Procurement Council has adopted preferred source guidelines that follow the law and provide additional policy direction. These guidelines speak to 2 relevant subjects with respect to our medicine cups application before you today: form, function, and utility, and impact assessment on New York State vendors and suppliers. We are bringing this application to you today, which would otherwise be under the OGS standing authority to review and approve, due to Empire State Development's recommendation to deny it. I know they will present their findings directly to you, but we appreciate the opportunity to react directly to their recommendation. So form, function, utility. There are many different types of med cups available to consumers. Variables include material, plastic or paper, graduated or non-graduated, lidded or open, grade, and that includes strength, durability, or if it's crush-proof, sterile, non-sterile, the size, 1 ounce, 5 ounce, the measurements, 1 ounce or milliliters, and packaging size, each 100 pack, $18.40 per case. So what we're proposing is to offer 3 very specific, narrowly defined, small packaging options for use in New York State compared to the very wide range of products available on state contract, in the open market, and there will be instances when we do not meet a customer's form, function, and utility. A NAICS code used in ESD's research covers a broad category called medical equipment supply and wholesaler. Is significantly broader than our 3 very specific types of med cups. Using that NAICS category would capture many thousands of items and related vendors that would not be the same form, function, and utility as proposed in our application. Preferred source guidelines indicate that ESD's review is to review applications to see if the introduction of a new commodity by a preferred source would have significant impact on a substantial number of New York State businesses. And that's important. According to a New York State Controller report issued in 2016, there are more than 451,000 small businesses in New York State, representing 3.9 million jobs. Using the federal definition of businesses under 500. Even if we look at businesses with fewer than 100 employees, those considered small under state economic development law, there's more than 2.7 million jobs. And that's great. I know from previous experience, small businesses are a major employer of people in New York. But in contrast, ESD's review indicates that there might be 18 companies impacted by our application. And of those, it's not clear if they offer the same form, function, utility cup, or most important, if they are even doing business with the state of New York. OGS's recommendation memo estimates annual sales for these like items averages about $30,000 a year. So our position is the review and findings submitted by ESD is out of scope of the Procurement Council adopted preferred source guidelines on form, function, utility, and their limited findings did not demonstrate that the addition of 3 specific, narrowly defined medicine cups would have a, quote, significant impact on a substantial number of New York State businesses. So in closing, I don't think we're here to debate the preferred source program or the NWBE program. Both programs have laudable missions to create opportunities for New Yorkers who have historically had barriers to procurement or employment opportunities. Both programs are creating taxpayers. We are here today to consider our application along with OGS's memo in support and if ESD's recommendation is consistent with the Procurement Council guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. So again, for folks that are new to the Procurement Council, OGS serves several roles. Obviously, with my role here, we serve as the chair of this council. We also provide staff to the council, and we are one of the oversight organizations for the preferred sources application process. So whenever OGS makes a presentation, I'm always going to want to make those distinctions between what role we're speaking in. So as one of the agencies that reviews preferred source applications, we'll now ask OGS to go through their review of the Medicine Cups application. Okay? Does everybody understand the different roles OGS plays? Great. Thank you. Patty, are you ready?
Good morning. My name is Patty Spraga. I am the team lead on the OGS Preferred Source team, and it is wearing that hat that I am speaking with you now. I'm going to review for you the highlights taken from the OGS recommendation that was sent to all council members, except for Winifred, on September 5th. And Winifred got hers a little bit later because she's the newest member. The application for preferred source designation of medicine cups was received on March 27th, 2017 from the New York State Preferred Source Program for People Who Are Blind, or NYS PSP, in partnership with the Central Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, or CAB-V. This application was sent to both OGS and Empire State Development simultaneously. In 2004, the Procurement Council designated the authority to OGS to approve applications for new commodities and service offerings meeting the following criteria. The preferred source price must be within 10% of the prevailing market. For this application, the prevailing market is New York State contract. The annual sales volume must be less than $500,000, and an application reviewed by Empire State Development does not identify objections from the business community. So, any application that does not meet all three of the above criteria must be submitted to the full Procurement Council for review and recommendation. OGS was unable to approve this application under our delegated authority based upon ESD's denial. OGS notified NYS PSP of this determination on 7/24/17, and NYS PSP requested that this application be presented to the council immediately thereafter. The preferred source guidelines adopted by the Procurement Council contain detailed requirements for application and for the addition of applications, the addition of commodities to the list of preferred source offerings. Those are set forth in section XD, and while I'm not going to go through them here, this list of 10 is itemized in the OGS recommendation. Staff, the OGS staff on the preferred source team has concluded that the application was complete and met all requirements of state finance law and the preferred source guidelines for pricing and participation by blind and visually impaired labor. OGS confirmed that the medicine cups are being repackaged by individuals who are blind or visually impaired, and that this repackaging provides the value-added labor to produce a finished commodity, and that value-added labor brings value to the product immediately to the purchasing entity. NYS PSP projected annual sales of the medicine cups in their application at $15,892. The prices proposed for each item were below state contract price. OGS contract sales data indicated that between 2014 and 2016, the actual sales for medicine cups of all types and sizes averaged $61,748. The average annual sales for the medicine cups, the 3 medicine cups equivalent to those in the New York State Preferred Source Program for people who are blind application, was $30,509. Based upon the foregoing, OGS staff has recommended that the Procurement Council approve the NYSP application and designate preferred source status to NYS PSP Cab V medicine cups. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Patty. And just as a reminder, we're going to open the floor for questions after all of the speakers, so thank you for your patience there. The other administrative review of this program, as was mentioned, is from Empire State Development. And Pravina, are you ready?
I guess so, yes. I just want to make sure.
Great, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Pravina Raghavan. I'm the Executive Vice President for Small Business Services for the Empire State Development. I would like to thank the Council and everyone for their time and attention. ESD recognizes that New York State's Preferred Source Program for people who are blind, also known as NYS PSP, works with and supports a very vulnerable and underrepresented population, and understands that their request to make various types or a very specific type of medicines cup as a preferred source designation. At ESD, we also look after a vulnerable and underrepresented population, which is small businesses and particular minority and women-owned businesses, also known as MWBEs. We want to support both vulnerable populations in their ability to access New York State contracts as well as local government contracts. And currently, both populations are able to compete and win contracting opportunities for these very specific medicine cups. Our analysis, which you should have received in your package, is in front of you. And we looked at market demand to see if there was a significant impact on small businesses and if NYS PSP was provided exclusive rights to this category, what would that impact be? I understand that my colleague has said that there's 2.7 million jobs, but similar to the NAICS code, that is a generic job against any small business in the country and any small business in the state, versus actually specifically looking at the jobs for at least, we've determined at least 6 companies that would be impacted. So I'd like to take you through some salient points of our analysis. First, we use publicly available data to determine the demand for this product. And we admit that this publicly demand data, which is the NAICS code, which was referenced, does not break down demand down to a product level. Unfortunately, to get this information, we actually have to conduct surveys. So what we do is we take the bigger population from the NAICS codes and then narrow it down. In this case, we narrowed it down to 91 companies, and then we performed actual searches on each of those companies, and we determined 18 of them actually have the same exact medicine cups on their product website. We then conduct surveys. I have to tell you, both the surveys to the agencies when we ask for their purchasing behavior, as well as the surveys to the small businesses, are voluntary. They are not compelled, or nor do they have any reason to respond to us. So of the 18, 12 have responded, and of those, 6 were determined to actually have the same exact medicine cup and actually go to state government agencies, and that's in the table. As you'll see, their demand, or the ones that decided to report their sales, is over the $15,000, or the average sales that OGS recommends of $30,000. It's actually almost to $60,000. Based on that math, small businesses represent, if you make the market of both, the $30,000 plus the other $30,000, $60,000, which is a very conservative estimate. Small businesses have over 72% of the sales in this market. So it is a significant impact. If this data was extrapolated to small businesses to present even a larger part of the over 2,000, say we said only 20% were viable, and of that 20%, 50% would actually sell the same cups, you'd get to have a market size of $360,000, and small businesses would still represent almost 90%. So we want to make sure that both populations are able to compete and win contracts with the state. So as it currently stands, both could compete today. NYS PSP is not precluded from actually getting the $15,000 worth of sales and creating the very vital jobs that are needed, as well as the small businesses to continue to retain their current customers and get future revenue for the same exact medicine cups. So we're asking that both vulnerable populations still be able to compete in the medicine cup marketplace, and not to detriment the small businesses that already are currently competing and do get their livelihood and create jobs and taxpayers. So we ask you to uphold our recommendation to allow small businesses and New York State PSP to compete both in this marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you, Pravina. The chair is wildly impressed with how on schedule we are, just for the record. Just before I let people ask questions. Okay, so because we didn't ask questions at each set, what we're going to do now is open this for discussion to the council. It's a couple formats. If you have a specific question about something that was presented, if you could let us know whether the question is for NYS PSP or it's for OGS or for ESD, sorry, that would be great. If you have a comment, you're certainly welcome to add that for participation also. And again, if you could just, for the purposes of the minutes, announce who you are before you either ask your question or make your comment, we would greatly appreciate that. And again, all of your mics are off. If you slide the button on the top towards the ball of the microphone, everybody will be able to hear you. Are there any folks that have questions or comments that would like to open the discussion on this? Tom?
Tom Hipshin, SUNY. I have questions for both NYS, PSP, and ESD.
Carrie, would you like to grab the podium? And I think everybody else has a mic available. Thanks.
So, Carrie, my first question is, the Mountainside Medical Equipment is identified as a service disabled owned small business. Are they New York State certified?
Yes.
They are, okay. And are they, it says supplier, so they don't manufacture the cups, right? They're just distributing them?
Yes, they're a vendor partner. They're
Okay, but I mean in terms of, you're doing the packaging and then
Yes.
the
Yes.
distribution is done by,
by CABV and Utica, yes.
okay,
Our blind agency.
all right. And out of curiosity, how did NYS PSP come up with the $15,000 estimated value?
So we do, I think similar to what Empire State Development representative said, we use the best available public data. We also use oftentimes, and in this case it's true, a customer will reach out to us and say they have a specific need and they would like it to be offered via preferred source. And so we take, that intel, we look at open book, we try to find, the best available public information. It's certainly more probably an art than a science, and we do the best we can with the information available. I'll note in ESD's memo, and I was sympathetic to it, they did a lot of surveys that didn't get responses. Maybe that's something we all want to talk about at a future Procurement Council meeting in terms of the availability of market research. But we do the best that we can, and we also factor in the fact that when we first bring something new to market, with all things preferred source, it takes a little education and a little outreach to get our customers to understand we're offering it. So that factors into our estimation as well.
I think that's all I had for you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Thank you,
Yes.
Carrie.
And for
Carrie, why don't you hang out?
You want me to stand? Stay?
Oh, I'm sorry.
just
Go ahead.
questions for ESD.
Sure.
So, first of all, first as a comment. Number one, I apologize because I see SUNY's did not respond. Next time, call me; they will respond. I followed up with them, and I did get one more response from Downstate Medical, which is buying off of a consortia contract for about $3,000. And so, next time, just let me know, and I'll help you because we do need this information to make an informed decision. In terms of the companies that you, surveyed, it says under certification it's M or WB. I'm assuming those are New York State certified?
Yes, they're all New York State MRWBs.
Oh, okay. And were any SDVOBs in that mix?
Of the 18 that we looked, no, but that's because we only went through 91. We didn't look at every single company under the 2000.
Okay. And you had mentioned that, based on your analysis, that 6 of the companies would have been impacted. Is that correct, what you said?
Yeah, they currently have sales. They're designated on the sheet, either Company B, Company D. And the reason some will respond to percentage of sales, some will respond to actual sales value because they find that proprietary data. So depending on that. So the ones that said, yes, we definitely sell, here's a percentage. It could be percentage of 1,000,000, we realize. It could be a percentage of 1,000. So we use when we estimate the demand, we look at the lower end because it's just to be more conservative.
So this is not the impact on the sale of medicine cups, it's their total sales. Is that correct?
That's correct. Their
Okay.
total sales.
And so 2 of the 14 that are listed here, it impact 10% or more of their sales.
That's correct.
Okay.
Of actual medicine cups.
Actual,
Yeah.
of actual medicine cups?
Yeah, so 10%, the percentage is sales to government entities, so that's the 10% goes towards medicine cups, that actual specific
Okay, so for example,
Like Company B.
B.
Take up- Yeah,
there's $35,000 worth of their sales as medicine cups?
that's correct, yes.
And it's medicine cups that are comparable to
Exact same cups, yeah.
exact same cups. Okay. Also, ESD notes the disparity study. I would just suggest to my colleagues to take a look at the disparity study and read the full context of the quote, because I think that it's, and I know that we're not here to debate the differences between MWB and the preferred source programs, both which are very important in the state of New York, but I think that there is clearly a misunderstanding within the disparity study response from the gentleman who was making reference to the impact that it may have on him. So I would just suggest that my colleagues read the disparity study.
Tom, are those all your questions?
Yes, thanks.
So I don't cut you off prematurely the next time. And I think, generally from the chair's perspective, this is specific to medicine cups, so we appreciate that any of those other conversations about the context that's provided there might happen separately from this conversation. So we appreciate that. Other comments, questions about this application? Okay. Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion. There is an application in front of us, right? So again, for new folks in an understanding of the process, there's an application in front of us. If there is a desire to move that application forward, we would ask for a motion from the council, and then for someone else on the council to second that motion. It seems like we have had discussion, but we would do one more call for discussion, and then we would call for a vote on the application. So if there's not a motion to move the application forward, then the application would have been reviewed and would not be moved to a vote. So having said that, the chair is now at that point where we would entertain a motion if there is a motion to move this application forward. Okay. Tom?
Tom Ipshin at SUNY. I motion to approve the request of the application by NYS PSP.
Okay. So Tom Hipshins has a motion to consider the application. Is there a second? Second. Steve Casarda is the second. Okay, so with a motion and a second, that means that this application is now available for discussion again, and then we'll go directly to vote on this application, on the approval of it. So before that, procedurally, I have to ask again, is there any other discussion? Anyone who wants to discuss pro or con on this application? Sorry, Alex?
Thank you. So Alex Green with Executive Chamber. A question for Pravina at ESD. Was the Division of Minority and Women Business Development consulted in your research regarding this issue?
Yes, they were. They are the ones who provide us with the certification designation and also try to help us get to companies so that we can survey them. As we said, some of these companies are not compelled. They're not compelled to respond, so they do try to help us so we can get more data to be able to be used.
Understood. And then I don't recall whether it was stated specifically in the ESD memo, but what was the outreach that was conducted to the firms, the 38 firms that came up under medical supplies and or the specific NAICS code search?
So for all 38 under MWBE, we go and actually look at each one of their websites to make sure it's the specific product because we don't want to, because they are under generic medical supplies. Of that, the ones that are designated certified on the application, we're actually selling the same exact product on their website, and then we survey them. After that, we send both emails and we follow up by phone calls.
Okay, and then there was a mention, last question, there was a mention of SDVOBs.
Yep.
I know that the SDVOB program is administered by OGS, so there was no outreach or survey of SDVOBs from your shops in, just to clarify.
Yeah, so we didn't look at that designation, and so going forward, we'll make sure to ask OGS if they could provide us with that for under those next codes so that we can add them to our designation. It isn't that they're probably part of the 2,700. We just didn't go down and drill upon all 2,700.
Nope, understood. It doesn't fall under your purview. And then I guess for OGS, was there any consideration in regards to your research as far as the impact on SDVOBs that this may have in moving, designating medicine cups as a preferred source?
Do you want to have this, sir? So the OGS's responsibility is different from Empire State Development's. So our review goes through 10 distinct steps. And compares, so does price reasonableness and make sure that there is going to be disabled labor working on the project. We don't actually look at, that's why the roles are divided, so we don't look at impact on the market specifically in the same way Empire State Development does. We go through a checklist of making sure that the application is compliant with the program.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify.
Yep.
So that being said, and stop me if I get too far ahead of myself, I know we have the motion and the second to move forward and and vote on the approval of the application. Is this an appropriate time to move to table this vote for further research in regards to the impact on SDVOB specifically?
Procedurally, you absolutely can make that motion. Actually, let me check, because I know there's a motion on the table, so hang on 1 second. Okay, so I think obviously if there's consideration of tabling this motion, it has to be done before we take a vote on the main motion, right? So yes, so if you wanted to make a motion to table it, we would consider that motion, and then that motion would require a second, and then we would discuss the motion to table before we went back to consider the motion for it to be approved. Tom?
Just before Alex puts that out there, I just had a clarifying question for Carrie at NYS PSP that may change whether there's another motion.
May I address
Okay.
that issue?
Okay.
Alex, I don't know if you're making a motion or not, but are you okay with other discussions and questions?
The question's fine.
Okay.
So right now, Carrie, NYS PSP is partnering with a New York State certified SDVOB, and it was based on 15,000. ESD has identified more potential growth. Is there anything precluding NYS PSP and CABVI from partnering with any MWBE or any other SDVOB to provide to our agencies?
No, thank you for the question, Tom. In fact, we have a WBE partner in the cleaning supplies, green cleaning supplies, actually, related to Todd's earlier presentation. So we do look to MWBEs and service-disabled veteran-owned businesses for as vendor partnering opportunities, absolutely. And so we already have a partner, and we're looking to add an additional partner. And one thing I have the mic. I do want to just repeat that the preferred source guidelines talk about a significant impact on a substantial number of New York State businesses. And I think that's important to repeat for the Procurement Council in your decision today.
I just want to clarify, though, the relationship or the agreement that you have with CABVI and Mountainside, there's no exclusivity in terms of your being able to partner with other New York State certified SDVOBs or MWBEs if the market should bear the growth.
Sure, absolutely. We always look to partner with service-disabled veterans and MWBE partner vendors.
Okay, so we're currently in discussion on a motion to consider this. If there are any other motions on the table, obviously we'll consider those also. And in the absence of that, or if there's not a motion, then we'll continue discussion. Does anybody have either a discussion point or a motion to rise to? Alex?
So have a motion to table for further research on the vote
Okay.
to determine the impact on SDVOBs and see how that fits into ESD's analysis.
Okay. So there is a motion on the floor to table. Is there a second? Okay. So there's a second from Empire State Development to table. So from the council, so again, for folks that are new, we have a motion on the table. Now we have a motion to table the application for the next meeting. We're going to discuss the motion to table, which would mean that we would not approve or deny or take any action on this application today, and then we would reconsider it at the next meeting after that material was reported out on. Are there any discussion on the issue of tabling? Tom?
Tom Hipsham from SUNY. Just to clarify, would it be tabled to the November meeting? Is that what we're saying?
Alex, that was my understanding of your motion, but could you clarify that for us?
Correct. The request is a table to the next quarterly meeting.
Okay.
Okay. So any other discussion on the motion to table? Okay. So seeing none, I'm going to call for a vote on tabling the motion. So for those of you that are new, what we're doing here is a yes vote is to table the discussion about this application, not move this application forward today, and reconsider it at the next Procurement Council meeting. A no vote on this would then move us back to discussion on the actual application, and there would be a motion open to take a vote on the application today. Does everybody understand that and what's happening before we vote? Okay. All in favor of tabling, could you please signify by putting your hands up? Okay. And, yeah, if you could just hold them up for 1 second. Alex Green, Steve Casarda, John, you're okay. Sorry, Julie. I'm having trouble with some of the signs here. Sean and Pravina and Joel. All right. Everyone against tabling, please signify by putting your hands up and holding them up so that we can get them recorded for the meeting. Okay. Amber, Winterford, Daniel, Jerry, Tom, Margaret, and Lisa. I'm sorry, Lisa. I'm sorry I didn't see your hand, Lisa. Did you get everybody? Was that too fast? I'm sorry, could you hold your hands up one more time? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you should have 2, 4, 5. You should have 8 no's. This is Lisa. You got everybody? 8 no's. Okay, thank you for holding your hands up. I appreciate it. Any abstentions? Ron Tescarella is an abstention on this. I'm sorry, Ron's a recusal. You're right, Noreen. I apologize, Ron. So Ron is a recusal because for those of you that are new, there is a process where if you have a vested interest in a vote or a process, then you have to recuse yourself from the vote on the Procurement Council. Okay? So can I ask, do you have a total vote count? Okay. Did we miss anybody who was a yes? Did everybody hear that? No, I think you've got everybody. And Winifred. Okay. Okay. So the motion to table fails. Again, any motion requires an affirmative 11 on the Procurement Council to move that forward. So with the motion to table failing, the question now comes back up. The application is now back on the table. Is there any more discussion about the application before we call that to a vote? No. Okay. Seeing none. Again, if you could indicate, in this case, a yes vote is in favor of a preferred source designation being approved for medicine cups on the current application, on the specific medicine cups in the application. A no vote is a recommendation that the medicine cups not be afforded preferred source status. And that, again, I think consistent with ESD's notes, that they continue to compete for that work. So again, if everybody could keep their hands up, that would be great. All in favor of approving this designation, please put your hands up. Okay. Can you guys see everybody? Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sorry, it's Joel, Winifred, Daniel, Lisa, Jerry, Julie, Tom, Margaret. You got everybody? Okay, great. Please put your hands down. For all that are against approving this, please put your hands up. Okay. So we have Alex and John, Sean, Amber, and Pravina. Just keep your hands up for one more second. Did you guys get everybody? 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 no's. Okay. Any abstentions? Abstentions first. Any abstentions? No. We have 1 recusal, right? Is Ron. Okay. Can you just, is that 10-5? Okay, so sorry about that. So from staff's perspective, the vote is 10-5 with 1 recusal. Okay, so it requires 11 to pass, so it doesn't have 11 votes. So the vote that's held right now does not approve the application.
Sean, can we just double check the ayes? She just wants to double check her number.
Excuse us a second. We're having a procedural question. While we're doing that, could the ayes put their hands back up one more time just for staff? We appreciate that. So for purposes of everybody understanding what we're discussing, we were discussing the role of the chair on the council and what my role is typically when there's not a question of pass or fail. The chair typically stays out of it. I am a fully vested member of the council. So after consulting with council, I have to provide a vote in one of the categories as a member, particularly in this situation. So based on the OGS staff recommendation, the chair casts a vote in favor, which makes 11 in favor for it to pass. And then we thank everybody for their participation and questions on that subject. Okay, so next on the agenda is a discussion about the temporary personnel proposed definition. So with that discussion, a little context for folks that have joined us recently. Over the past 2 years, an effort that started in response to an audit that then sort of has been progressing for the 2 years since then has been really an instruction and guidance for this council that we need to have specific definitions of approved services. So the application we just did was for a commodity. So it is a fairly tangible subject. We've also discovered that we need definitions for all of the services that are provided by the preferred sources. For those of you that are not new, we have gone through this process repeatedly at Procurement Council meetings or intermittently at Procurement Council meetings over the last 7 or 8 meetings. For those of you that are new, congratulations, you're here for the last one of the services that were approved that had to be clarified. All new services will require specific definitions when they come before this council. So this council saw fit to send the last definition, which is for the proposed definition is for temporary personnel office. And this council saw fit to send that definition to a work group discussion. A work group is an informal place for everyone who has concerns about the definition to vet those concerns with interested stakeholders. And then the ultimate goal of a work group is a consensus. And generally a consensus is something that everyone that is on the work group can agree with or agree to. This work group came out with a result of general consensus on a number of items without consensus on a few remaining items. So the way we're going to approach this today is we're going to have an official work group report, which represents, in some cases, the consensus, and some cases, the plurality or the majority of the work group. And then we're going, and I believe all of this has been distributed to the council, then we're going to discuss any places where there was disagreement on the work group. We're going to allow that disagreement to have the opportunity to be vetted. And then we'll go through and do questions from the council and go through the same process of discussing, is this now a definition that this council can vote on or a motion to vote on? Is that an acceptable process for everybody? Is that consistent for everybody who was on the work group with what we committed to on the work group? Okay, so seeing no objections to that, what we're going to do now is the work group findings and recommendations. Joel Lombardi from ITS has graciously agreed to do that. Please remember, in all cases here where any particular perspective is being provided, it's being provided by a member of the work group, but the discussion really reflects the entire content of the work group. So it's not specific to ITS or specific to any other participants. So Joel, if you're ready and you would do that, that would be great.
Hello, everyone. Joel Lombardi, Director of Contract and Procurement at ITS. Like Sean said, in 2006, OSC advised the Procurement Council that we should begin to define, and we have done so, and this is the last remaining. The work group was constituted. Can you hear me now? Way better, okay. Work group was constituted. OGS was chair, and included in the working group was representatives from ESD, Office of Mental Health, OSC, Department of Labor, ITS, and OGS on the state side. In addition, there were representatives from State Education Department as an oversight agency for NYSID AccuStaff, which is a private corporation which provides services through the OGS Administrative Services contracts. Good Temps, which works with NYSID in New York City to provide services under this, this definition, and NYSID itself. The working group met for 7 two-hour meetings beginning on June 15th, and throughout the entire course of the group, 25 different individuals participated. So one of the major focuses of the working group was a contract between NYSID and New York City Department of Contracting Services, which we refer to as DCAS, which has around 600 job titles. And we sort of started in that context. And the goal of this group was to create sort of a reasonable and generally accepted definition for what a temp office worker is. There's a few things that we, on initial blush, we came to consensus. One of them is that the new definition would apply to service applications going forward. So this would not be anything that was retroactive, and that it would apply to amendments, new applications. We also made note that the DCAS contract does not expire until 2019. So if there were any issues, new applications could be submitted prior to the expiration of that contract. And that there was no desire on anyone's part to negatively impact the employment opportunities for anyone who's employed under NYSID. That being said, there was much debate about the inclusion of certain things, and I'll discuss those briefly. Included in the debate was the inclusion of IT positions, which were ultimately excluded from the definition. As well, there was much debate about the inclusion of ticket takers, subway passenger counters, test monitors, and proctors, and also, generally speaking, positions that require college degree, accounting, actuary, business degrees, things like that, and those continue to be a source of contention. The majority of the working group members believe that these titles should be excluded and that NYSID should reapply or should apply for a new heading to the Procurement Council, and that is and should be the remedy. But NYSID also had some additional comments on that, which I'm sure they'll bring to you. Issues that created additional debate, the inclusion of positions involving field work, included in positions that outside of the office also discussed were lifeguards specifically, including, as I said, proctors and monitors. We also discussed what it means to have a temporary position in a defined office space versus in an actual physical office, and how the world is changing, virtual offices, et cetera. We discussed the need for requiring a 4-year degree or excluding a 4-year degree. So most of these things were, like I said, resolved. However, there were some points of contention that remained. However, that being said, the majority of the working group did come to a consensus with a few disagreements, and that is the definition you have before you, and you should have been provided a copy. And on behalf of the working group, I'm making the recommendation that we do adopt this definition, and that you vote to affirm it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Just as a technical clarification of the material you have in front of you, there is a clean copy of the work group proposed definition. There is also a copy of the definition that has a lot of the questions and concerns that will be vetted now through discussion included in it. So if anybody has any question about following the documents, please feel free to let us know that. But we specifically provided both. One was a clean version, and one was a version that had content to it about what the remaining discussion will be. So the next set of discussions on the agenda is from Empire State Development. Pravina, are you ready?
Yep. Just a clarification, so for everyone who has the copy, you'll see that there are 3 areas. It says ESD comment. Really, our comments were general questions and not a recommendation. It was really a question. We were asking if these words or phrases that we highlighted in 3 sentences would trigger any concerns in line with our labor unions and agreements and partners. Given OGS's response in the document, it seems our concerns not warranted in that it wouldn't trigger any problems with our labor unions, so we have no concerns, so we're good to support current proposed working group definition that Joel just went and talked about.
Great. We apologize for any
Oh, it's okay.
confusion
Yeah,
there.
that's
And
the loveliness of email.
just picked up 9 minutes, so that's very exciting. Okay, next on the agenda, sorry? Oh, I wasn't supposed to hear that. Okay. Next on the agenda is feedback from, I don't know if it's going to be either NYSID or Good Temps or both, who were part of the work group, and some feedback on the open items that Joel referenced.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. At least I think it's afternoon. I appreciate, the council giving us the time today. I'm going to make some comments and provide some additional context regarding our participation in the work group, but prior to doing that, I am pleased to introduce Katie Gall-Stiggy, who is the president and CEO of Goodwill Industries of Greater New York and Northern New Jersey, Inc., as well as Good Temps, who will provide some comment in her own context about what this service offering has meant and continues to mean for their agency and for the individuals that they've been entrusted to serve. So I'll turn the floor over to Katie, and then I'll come back.
Hello. Thank you very much for your time. I know this has been a long-standing area of your work. My name is Katie Gall-Stiggy, and I was introduced as the president of Goodwill of Greater New York and Northern New Jersey. You may know us from our thrift stores, but we are a social enterprise nonprofit with a 5-star charity rating. Thank you for the opportunity. My professional background for the last 14 years has been deeply involved with the field of workforce development. Most recently, I was at the City of New York prior to coming to Goodwill and was the executive director of the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development, responsible for coordinating workforce with economic development in all 5 boroughs and effectively connect New Yorkers seeking workforce services to high-quality jobs with opportunities for advancement. I worked in partnership with more than a dozen city agencies, as well as being deeply familiar with the hard work of procurement after being a deputy commissioner at our NYC HRA and overseeing over $60 million of different TANF contracts. At Goodwill, I lead the strategic direction for a 100-year-old social enterprise, and we create jobs through both the donation of clothing and household goods. We're a key provider of programs for disabled and hard-to-employ persons. Our mission is to empower individuals to gain employment and to gain independence through the power of work, and that's what we'll be discussing today. In 2016, we provided staff for over 500 employer partners and sent over 750 well-qualified temporary employees to work each day and placed, as an agency, over 6,200 people into jobs. Goodwill respectfully asks the Procurement Council not to restrict the location, education requirements, access to salary or confidential information, the ability to supervise, or use any type of master contract in the preferred source offerings or miscellaneous titles that require field work to support an office or department, as was just discussed. This would be by moving and making a motion to pass this amended definition that you have with the NYSID comments that is in your packet and was received on September 6th. For clarity, you've been hearing from Good Temps, which is a division of Goodwill, our nonprofit. This has been, we've placed a variety of temp jobs through NYSID pursuant to the New York State Finance Law, Article and Section 162. Last year, Goodwill's Good Temps division placed in total over 1,200 well-qualified individuals with disabilities in preferred source positions. The average wage was $16.46 per hour, notably higher than New York City's current minimum wage. These employees worked an average of 30 hours per week, thus making them eligible for medical benefits through Goodwill, and 83% of those we placed were minorities, while 59% were women. They represent a broad range of disabling conditions, including mental health issues, physical disabilities, deaf hearing impairment, blind and some visual impairment, developmental disabilities, including, but not limited to, autism spectrum disorders. As you may know, the rate of unemployment for persons with disabilities is almost 80%.
as my colleague said, 8-0, but for non-disabled people, only 4%. So one can easily see how important these preferred source opportunities are. We hope that any discussion or consideration to the definition takes into account the impact it could potentially have to the workers with disabilities, their families, and the New York community. We're not alone. Elected officials, and you have Senator Adubo Jr., Assemblywoman Alicia Gunther, Senator Young, and Senator Ott have all supported this and sent letters in this, and over 673 people signed our Change.org petition to keep access to these opportunities last year when this work group took on this work. Sorry, I lost my place. The Office of the State Controller, in a routine audit of NYS, had made this recommendation to provide clear definitions. We respectfully suggest that the Procurement Council fulfill this today with this motion and vote to add these amendments. Governor Cuomo has declared New York State as an employment-first state. This proclamation and effort demonstrates the governor's understanding of the staggering effects of an 80% unemployment rate on persons with disabilities, frequently leaving them in a state of poverty over their historically dismal employment prospects. One cannot help but feel that the discussion on office temps is pervaded by a general resistance in the use of temps at all, as well as a feeling by other state and private agencies that this is a zero-sum game, and that contracts and titles awarded through preferred source are perceived as competition rather than cooperation, thus ignoring the legislative intent of the program. We believe that our focus should be on the positive impacts of these employment opportunities for well-qualified persons with disabilities and not on limiting them. It is my understanding that the work group has addressed a number of these issues discussed, and I will address them. With regard to the accessing confidential information, salary-related or otherwise, we do not see how this relates to the definition of an office temp. As an example, New York State and New York City salaries of officials and employees are public information. We believe there's no greater likelihood that a temp worker with a disability, as opposed to any non-temp or regular state or city worker, would disclose any confidential information. Every state or city agency can provide the same confidentiality training to a temporary worker as it does to their employees. All workers, through goodwill, good temps or not, are required to comply with New York State, city, and state laws around confidentiality, including HIPAA, HIV protection, and others. Goodwill provides bonding and insurance on demand for any requesting preferred source agency. In the matter of asking agencies to provide specific defined locations or addresses where work might occur, we fail to see how this relates to the definition of an office temp. As an example, HRA, a former agency where I was, has over 14,000 employees and uses a variety of goodwill temp workers in various locations as needed. There's simply an ongoing need for temps to fill an open position for persons on FMLA, vacations, sick leave, and the like. We want to make sure that these proposed restrictions are not trying to minimize the ability of the agencies to utilize temps as needed. When and if procuring agency sees a need, they may do so. In addition, all the agencies in New York City operating under the DCAS master contract only operate in New York City's 5 boroughs, and therefore the mandate for the defined location we find is unnecessary. Concerning the requirement of a 4-year college degree, many persons with disabilities have advanced education, and we see no reason to restrict opportunities. We would not be including licensed and certified professionals, such as CPAs, MD, professional engineers, or the ITS, information technology service job titles, such as data systems engineers, data architects, etc., in our offerings. We do believe that basic IT help desk functions should be included in office temp offerings. We believe that office temps can be accountants or other non-licensed professionals, as they are in the private sector. For example, Robert Half International has an entire division called Account Temps that places temp office workers in titles that include senior accountant, accounting manager, financial analyst, and other related titles. The private sector can effectively and efficiently deal with issues around for-college degrees, confidentialities, and supervision, and we believe this is not and will not be an issue for Good Temp's goodwill. Lastly, we encourage the allowance of these miscellaneous titles to include job functions in question, instead of eliminating jobs for persons with disabilities. Many state and city contracts have long lists of job titles and functions they want to have filled. Some of these are under the miscellaneous rather than strictly office titles per se. For example, the MTA includes passenger counters, temperature takers for train cars, and test monitors and proctors for the MTA civil service exam. These aforementioned job titles are not manual labor in nature. They are essentially clerical by description, whether or not they actually occur in the location of an office. These miscellaneous positions, although not permanently assigned to an office, are essential to providing support to the specific department or office to which they are assigned. The prohibition of these miscellaneous titles will result in the loss of employment for up to 200 individuals with disabilities who were placed on the MTA contract for this past year, for example. So a woman by the name of Veronica Thompson, who has physical limitations, she was able to get employment as a test monitor, which would be an opportunity that would be removed if this current definition was adopted. Goodwill respectfully asks the Procurement Council not to restrict, again, the location, educational requirements, access to salary and confidential information, the ability to supervise, the use of any master contract or the miscellaneous titles that require field work to provide support in an office or department. Thank you again for the opportunity to address this most important and pressing issue. We request that you approve the definition from NYSID, which is this one, as received on September 6th by the Council. If you do that, that will continue to enable Veronica and hundreds of New Yorkers to continue to connect to the power of work, to gain independence, and to be tax-paying contributors to the great Empire State. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, once again, good afternoon. I'm Joe Messina, Vice President of Sales with NYSID. I'd like to first start by thanking the members of the work group for committing their time to provide perspective and insight regarding the definition of temporary personnel office. While NYSID and Goodwill appreciate the group's participation, we must, however, respectfully disagree with the definition of temporary personnel as proposed. It was our belief and hope that the crafting of definitions for preferred source offerings would create new opportunity for individuals with disabilities and, at a minimum, preserve existing employment. That will most assuredly not be the case should the definition of temporary office personnel office be approved as proposed. The proposed workgroup definition, we believe, goes well beyond a description of task and function for prospective end users and crosses into contract administration, college degree prohibitions. For example, what does the definition of a service offering have to do with how a contract is administered by the procuring agency, i.e. a backdrop contract or a centralized contract as promulgated, as Joel said, by the New York City Department of Citywide Administrative Services? The city's intent through that centralized contract with NYSID for temporary staffing services is to facilitate and alleviate the administrative burden of its agencies to meet their temporary staffing needs. Rather than each New York City mayoral agency having to administer its own contract, a master agreement available to all agencies would greatly streamline that process. Another major concern with the definition as proposed is that procuring agencies who include these titles that are prohibited could disqualify NYSID as non-conforming to their form, function, utility requirements. This could potentially result in the loss of our service offering and employment for more than 1,000 individuals. NYSID has been providing these miscellaneous positions such as passenger counters, survey issuers, temperature takers, test monitors, bindery workers, etc., for more than 15 years, and now those jobs appear to be in jeopardy. The miscellaneous titles in question are unique to a specific agency, basically the MTA and its affiliate organizations, and as mentioned previously, we've been providing these services successfully for 15 years. I have not been able to identify any other contracts in the open market requiring this type of service, nor have we been contacted by any other procuring agencies seeking to place like positions. We are merely seeking to preserve the employment currently in place, and in particular, provide services to a customer whose contract is due to expire shortly. It is our belief that the matter of miscellaneous titles could also be remedied through the e-list of service offerings, which has temporary personnel listed as a category. As such, agencies could use this category voluntarily, and OGS approval could be obtained, as would be the case for all other positions. We also object to the prohibition of positions requiring a 4-year degree. If a procuring agency requires that a prospective candidate possess a 4-year degree, why then would we not be able to place that individual as long as the position comports to the tasks and functions prescribed in the definition? Lastly, at the Procurement Council meeting on July 14th of 2016, I believe it was OSC's representative on the council who expressed concern about the prospect of individuals with disabilities being blocked from gaining entry into these higher paying positions, which could be impinging upon discrimination. This definition does nothing to address those concerns. We ask that the council exercise its authority and discretion and consider the version of the definition we proposed that addresses the concerns and puts limitations on individuals with disabilities. Thank you for your time today. Greatly appreciated.
Great, thank you. So now we'll follow the same process. We'll open the floor to the council for both questions and or comment. Again, please let us know who you are when you go to speak, and please let us know who your question is for if you have a question, and then we'll take comment. We have we want to be respectful of, particularly with the holiday starting tonight, we want to be respectful of the time, so we're going to start with the idea that we'll open the floor for about 15 or 20 minutes for comment and conversation. If conversation leans particularly in one direction, I will ask for comments that may represent the other opinion in order to make sure that the discussion is balanced. Okay? Does anyone have any questions or comments that they'd like to speak to? Pravina?
Pravina from ESD. I just want to make sure that everyone realizes that the ESD proposed edits were not edits, so they would be to the working group definition. So I just want to make sure there's the confidential and the supervision. We're in agreement with the working group, because we just wanted to make sure there was no.
Okay. So I believe that comment is in response to some of the feedback on the modified version. The discussion about access to confidentiality was not a prohibition in the work group version, right, Joe?
That's correct.
Okay. So at least from the work group's perspective. So I just think that's a point of clarity, a place where the work group agreed with the comments that were made, and I don't think those things made the final version. Comments, questions? Julie, and then Margaret.
Thank you. As somebody who's new to the council, I just had 2 clarifications. Julie Suarez from Cornell. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate the coaching. So the issue of the college degree, I wanted to just verify, even though OGS did a great job of putting this in italicized notes, nothing would preclude an individual, a temporary service worker who is disabled, who has a 4-year degree, from fulfilling one of these job titles, correct?
Joel, do you want to respond, or do you want me to?
I can respond, and just correct me if I'm wrong. So the way that the definition is proposed, it is any positions that require a 4-year degree are not included. So nothing would preclude someone with a 4-year degree from seeking a position, correct?
Thank you. That was my understanding, and just wanted to verify that. And then I admit that the discussion between whether anybody who's currently on a contract is impacted with a job is a little confusing to me. So for instance, if somebody wants to find employment as a test proctor or an MTA ticket taker, nothing precludes NYSED from applying to the Procurement Council to define a different
category of temporary office worker, correct?
That's correct. So two points just to make sure I clarify. So we agreed at the working group that it would not impact existing engagement. So who's employed right now under that engagement, whatever that contract term is, will not be impacted. Only new contracts, new amendments, and new engagements going forward. But number two is that is correct that there is nothing preventing a new application to the council. And I'd like to point out, and I forgot to point out in one of my bullets, is that previously defined by the council is actually temporary personnel warehouse. So I think that there was a recognition at one point that office and warehouse were separate environments and required a separate definition. So I think that the majority of the working group thought that that would also apply to field work and other categories.
Thank you.
Would I be able to respond to that too, Sean, and provide some additional context in to that question?
Sure.
It was my hope that as you know, we were all tasked with the responsibility of coming up with a definition, to be able to do so today, because the level or the amount of miscellaneous positions here is limited to the overall number of positions or categories that have been added to this definition. And as such, to your question, there are going to be contracts that come up for new terms and renewal agreements where these individuals are going to be impacted if a resolution isn't arrived at quickly. So, you know, our hope today was, you know, as Joel mentioned, we came to consensus or agreement on the bulk of the primary topics here. And it was our goal to have, you know, some discretion, you know, included in this decision-making process that would allow for these types of miscellaneous functions.
Okay, other questions or comments? Margaret.
Thank you, and Julie, thank you. I had a similar question about the titles. One remaining question. The work group, did it consider, or from what you're telling me, I'm understanding that you thought there might be more categories of temp services than office because there's an existing warehouse. And so it would not be unusual in the future to see additional proposals for other kinds of temp services that, you know, anybody looking in from the outside wouldn't normally associate with an office specifically. For instance, some of the miscellaneous that are being discussed today.
That's correct. That was, I think, extensively discussed as the word I would use. I believe at almost every meeting that was discussed. Correct. And the consensus majority was as I represented, and then the dissenting viewpoint.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Pro or con questions? Okay, Tom. And then Lisa will come back to you.
Goes back to the four-year degree. While I understand that someone who has a four-year degree, and according to the statistics, there's more than 58,000 people are currently unemployed with a four-year degree. Can the work group explain to me the reason why, and I know it's written here by staff, that there hasn't been a position that's required a four-year degree, but just because one hasn't been asked for, I don't understand the reason for limiting it. For someone who has a four-year degree would be able to use their achievement of a four-year degree to be a temporary service worker.
So I think that, you know, from the discussion that I'm recalling from the working group and the minutes, is that the discussion wasn't around whether or not persons with disabilities who have four-year degrees can perform services for the state. It was whether or not it was properly defined as office worker, temporary office worker. So that was really where the discussion focused. So perhaps it would be more appropriate under a different category, but for temp office worker, it was just not something that should be under the definition.
For some additional context, Tom, the discussion really was around labor. The Labor Department was part of the discussion, and the discussion kept coming back to what is the defining characteristic of a job that actually fits in temporary office personnel. So at some point, particularly the way, if we just use it as an example, not as formative guidance, but as an example, a lot of civil service titles, when you get up into titles that become management or titles that are starting to be professional titles, one of the defining characteristics of that is the requirement for a 4-year degree, as opposed to a 4-year degree in forming a person's skills and making them available to provide those services. One of the questions became, at what point does that become a professional service or a service that didn't neatly fit into temporary office personnel, if that helps answer your question. Tom, are you all set with your question for now? Lisa?
This is Lisa from OPWDD. NYSID, if you could just clarify your concerns regarding the 4-year degree language in it. Is there a concern that by not allowing a 4-year degree that there's perhaps lower wages?
No, I mean, and we discussed this at length during the work group discussions, whether or not we all agree if a position would cross over into a professional or IT specialized related category, a procuring agency might deem a 4-year degree for an administrative assistant as being pertinent to their needs and wants. And in that instance, based on the definition as written now, would preclude NYSID's participation in that procurement because it would require a position requiring a 4-year degree. And we just don't think that's fair. We've proven our ability to place individuals with 4-year degrees into temporary positions. I provided information based on a study done by, I believe, Cornell in 2015, that there were over 58,000 individuals in New York State alone with 4-year degrees or higher that were unemployed and actively seeking employment. So there's obviously a platform through the Preferred Source program by which we can place those individuals, and that's our concern.
Thank you. If we move forward with something like this, is it possible to not accept or postpone the decision to accept the definition until we can make some provisions for the employees that are already employed under this term, even though I understand that it was said that it's going to be for the future, but sometimes it takes a while to put something together, so I'd want to be sure that we could continue to employ individuals with disabilities in the interim.
So there's several mechanisms here. The first one is to consider, there could be a motion for one or others of the drafts that are proposed. They could come before the council for a vote. There could be modifications to either the work group response or if the inclination is towards the NYSID version, there could be modifications to that on the floor that would address those issues. Let me ask a clarifying question to council to find out what the ability to approve in part is or to modify after we approve. So just bear with me a second. Okay, we have clarification. So there's several, maybe we don't, hold on. Next time I'll stay for the whole conversation. Based on our understanding is once a service is approved, right? Obviously, this definitions process was we've considered it a one-time process to get those definitions done. Once a service is approved, it would be challenging to change the definitions once it's approved, because there would already be people executing or doing work under those. So ideally, whatever gets passed by the council today will be the definition, or if the council chooses to pass something today. I think the other question about making sure that individuals with disabilities are not disadvantaged, if there is an opportunity to have another definition or to have a clarification, I think the issue really goes to when those contracts expire. So there may be other contracts out there, but the primary contract that was under discussion was the DCAS contract for New York City, and that contract does not expire until 2019. So there are, we believe, at least 5 procurement council meetings between now and then, if the procurement council wanted to take up the discussion of any additional definitions or changes for other types of temporary personnel. So if I didn't understand your question, I'm happy to clarify. I don't know if that answers it.
It does answer it, but just to be sure I understand the response, so that in essence would preclude people with disabilities from getting a position for 2 years if it took that long to define, to provide a definition for the categories of work that was presented today. Because I can imagine that there's possibility for working opportunities that come along every day that might not fall within this definition of temporary office, but is also not warehouse. So by accepting this definition, that's going to preclude the possibility of employment for people with disabilities if there's no other definition to hire them under.
In a new environment, there is that potential, but under the existing contracts, where I believe, and I'll defer to NYS, but under the existing contracts where the large majority of the work is being done, there is already an existing contract that would not be affected. So in that environment, there would be opportunities to continue to place until the expiration of that contract. In a new environment, I believe you're correct that it would require a new definition, a new application for a new type of temporary personnel, and then only after that took effect would future work be able to be applied under that.
Sean, if I may, you offered me the ability to clarify something. That's not, in effect, entirely true. The DCAS contract is the least of our concerns because it doesn't include the miscellaneous positions that we're discussing today. The MTA contract is the one that's imminently due to expire, which has these passenger counters, survey issuers, and temperature takers. And therein lies the concern. As an agency that requires OSC approval, I'm not quite sure they'd be considered an authorized user under the DCAS contract anyway. So we're left to go through potentially a process that could take months to resolve, to have a potential new category added. Our concern today is that the needs and wants and support functions of departments and offices has changed dramatically in 2017 compared to the 20 years ago when this category was incorporated into the list of offerings. And that is what we're asking for today, is some flexibility and discretion from this body to allow for these kind of miscellaneous outlier positions so we don't jeopardize our overall clerical administrative contracts.
Tom, I know you've asked a question. We'll come back to you. Alex, do you want to ask one? And then we'll come back.
Thank you. So, Alex Green, Executive Chamber, and excuse me for my ignorance, but I think based on my experience with state procurement in general and then previous discussions for the council, is there any information or data on how the definitions as proposed by the council and the working group would impact, and again, excuse my ignorance, would impact employees that are deployed by NYSIF that are disabled versus non-disabled employees, employees or temps deployed by NYSIF who might be brought under via other temp agencies, et cetera, that are working with NYSIF and or Goodwill.
It's a NYSID, I just want to clarify.
NYSID, excuse me.
As it was discussed early on in our, explanation, there are 200 individuals right now at risk in these miscellaneous titles, and based on statute, a minimum of 75% of those individuals would have to qualify with a disability under the Access VR definition. So my math is not that good, I'm not too sure, but 75% of 200 are immediately at risk, but in the bigger picture, the 1,000 people that we currently have placed could be at risk if agencies start to roll in positions that have not been adopted into a definition that was approved by the Procurement Council. That is our major concern, and the fact that it could take months, if not longer, to have a new title, group of titles, or category, approved by this body.
Alex, does that answer your question, Alex?
That's fine.
Okay. Tom, and then if there's any other questions. And then we are coming up on the 1 o'clock time frame, so we'll have to think about our strategy there.
I have a question for Joe and then a question for the work group in general. So, Tom Hipson-Suni, how would people that are in the miscellaneous category, if their positions were to come up and the proposed definition was accepted, and those people would not be in the and an agency were to have a need to fill, could NYSID employees still have access to that job?
I don't see how, based on the description provided by the procuring agency here.
I guess my question is, how would the procuring agency fill that position? Would NYSID be blocked out of offering the individuals that are in that job or could be qualified to do that job?
Oh, absolutely. I think what they would do is they would go out for a procurement for all of their temporary staffing needs, which includes these miscellaneous positions, as well as the clerical and administrative positions we currently place. I believe the number is over 250 currently. And, it's something we have approved. The contract is in place. These agencies have deemed these to fall into the office temp realm, so we just like to continue, providing business as usual. Otherwise, these will be put out for a competitive bid.
Okay, so it wouldn't be a one-off. It would be a group competitive
Correct.
bid. Okay.
Correct.
Thanks.
Yep.
And
Tom, can I just clarify, is your question whether NYSID could compete for the work if they didn't have it as part of the preferred definition?
yes, and yes, and they could.
So is the answer that NYSID could not compete?
Oh, we could bid on any competitive solicitation. However, the preference would be removed at that point.
Okay.
And my question for the work group is, in the background, under notes, number 3 says, and I think, Sean, you made reference to this, I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. There's no prohibition against the Procurement Council amending the definition previously approved. It might not be an easy amendment, but there is no restriction for that. So if something passed today, it could always be amended later by the Procurement Council, and it would have to come from NYSID, or how does that happen?
So there's some technical questions about what the mechanics of that would be. I think there would be a concern about whether the definition could be made any smaller than it is, because there's not a mechanism to take approved services and really do that. But I'm not positive of that, but there's some technical discussions about how that would have to happen. I believe any member of the Procurement Council could suggest that, or could make a motion to amend it, but there would be a process of vetting that material and going through it. So if the council wants instructions on how that would happen, we can certainly take it back. I don't know that I'm prepared to fully explain it today. Let me find out if there's anything I need to add that I've completely misrepresented here before. While they're finding out how far off I am, other questions and comments, and Tom, obviously, if I have to come back and clarify, I will. Give me 1 second. I'm naturally facing this direction. Am I missing anybody over here? No? Okay. Sorry, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa Davis, OPWDD. I think if there's concern about already talking about changing it, then perhaps we shouldn't decide today. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? And then I'd like to put some options for what our next step would be on the table. Jerry?
Jerry Minot Sherman from DOB. Given where we are and the fact that we do have a meeting scheduled in 2 months, which is kind of normal odd for us, is it possible that we could table this now with the understanding that we would be focusing on this one portion of this proposal and see then, because I don't think any of the contracts are going to run out between now and then. And if they are, I don't think they're going to have new ones out that fast. Government doesn't work that fast usually, even on renewals. And that way we would have an opportunity to focus with the work group more on just that one and what one issue and what approaches may be available to us in 2 months that we could incorporate into this.
So there's a couple procedural items there. It's a great opportunity to address that. The council can take up one or the other of the definitions and consider that for a vote. The council can table the discussion. You can either table it indefinitely or table it with a specific purpose of coming back up on the next meeting. That is different than referring it to a work group or referring it back to the work group. Because the work group had, I believe, 7 two-hour meetings on this, I'm not sure what additional benefit there is in returning this to a work group, because there is potential for exactly the same result to come back out from the work group, and I would say there's probably a high potential for that. It is a different action than just tabling it, so certainly there is the option to table it and for members of the council to ask questions and to do that in anticipation of the meeting in 2 months. So in any event, all of those are actions that are privileges of the council members. Hang on 1 second. So the formal mechanisms are there would have to be something on the table, right? So we haven't actually held a motion yet to put one of these on the table for discussion. So we could, as a method of administrative process, in the interest of time, we could hold it for the next meeting. Before doing that, I would like to get a sense from the group of where we're at there, whether there's a motion on the table or not. I'm not asking for an official vote, but I'd like to get a sense of what the temperature of the room is. Certainly, if there is a desire to make a motion to bring one or the other of these definitions to the floor, then as the chair, we would go through the normal process. So that really is a question for this group: is there a general consensus for us from an administrative standpoint of moving this to the next meeting to finish this discussion, or is there an interest from any council members in proposing a motion? I don't necessarily know how to get that feedback. Could everybody stare at me intently if you want me to do something, or Julie? And then Joel will come back.
I think that this definition proposed by the work group is very thorough and well done, but I do have concerns that NYS had raised over the miscellaneous titles. It seems to me an approach, and obviously throwing this out, but it seems to me if we adopted this current definition that's on the floor, that would make sense, but with the proviso that we come back in the 2 months' time with a recommendation from staff as to how to handle the other category of workers. That'd just be my thoughts.
And so that thought is independent of a separate application? Okay. I have to find out what the mechanism is for that, but okay, that feedback is heard. Thank you. Joel?
I have interest in making a motion if we have the time and.
Okay. So if you're interested in making a motion,
Making the
feel
motion.
free to make a motion.
Yeah, so I'd like to move to adopt the working group definition.
Okay, and then Pravina, you seconding it? Yeah. Okay, great. So there is an opportunity for discussion now. So Steve, I know you're there, and Winifred, if you, I saw your hand first, so.
I have a question. Winifred Schiff from the Interagency Council. Is there an option today to vote on the amended version or just the proposed version?
So technically, the current motion on the floor is for the proposed motion, the proposed definition. If that was to fail, there would be, certainly the council has the prerogative of making the motion to vote on the amended version. Steve, sorry.
I guess my point of view is that I don't think we should vote on something we're not totally sure about. I think there's some things that are still hanging up in the air. I'm not sure we have all the information to make the decision. I do think the work group did an incredible job coming to what they came to. As a labor attorney who writes collective bargaining agreements for a living and defines job titles, you guys did an amazing job, everybody did, but as I sit here today, I'm not ready to make that decision, and I would rather do it once than come back to it, because it doesn't seem that it's going to happen, or it's going to get delayed, or we're going to argue about it. So having said that, I'd like to make a motion to table.
Okay, so procedurally, there is a motion to table on the floor. Is there a second? So Lisa, you want a second to table? Okay. So again, procedurally, we had a motion on the floor. Now we have a motion to table it. So a yes vote. For clarification, Steve, your motion is to table specifically to the next meeting. Okay. So there is a motion on the table. There is a motion to table to the next meeting. A yes vote suggests that, or says that you want to table this and resume this conversation at the next meeting in order to finalize the definition, hopefully, knock on wood. A no vote would not table the motion and would continue the discussion right now, which is about the proposed definition by the work group. Does everybody understand that? Does everybody have any procedural questions or questions before?
Is there, JP Burrell from Docs, is there specific information that we're requesting or analysis that we're asking being done in anticipation of the November 8th meeting? Or are we just tabling it for further discussion in November? So is there some other additional information? And I agree with Steve's point that I think we need additional information to make an intelligent decision about it. But what is that information that we're requesting as a council in order to be able to make that and have a further discussion?
We'd certainly be open to hearing what that is.
Me too, but my point of view is that I understand what NYS has said so far. I think if it's presented in a little bit different way where we can pick and select or try to make a decision on it, it seems right now that we're basically in a spot where we're going to either make a motion for one point of view or the other, where we're kind of in the middle. So somewhere along the line, someone's going to have to figure out how to present it in a way that we can make a decision on these things. And I think that's going to kind of be up to NYS.
Well, I mean, we would avail ourselves to have any further discussion, with the work group or a subcommittee of the work group to come to a consensus.
Is there some more, excuse me, this is Lisa Davis from OPWDD. Is there more quantitative data you can provide, maybe beyond the contract that Sean referenced?
What specifically?
A different type of impact. So we're kind of focusing right now on what the speaker from Goodwill talked about. Are there other impacts?
Oh, absolutely.
Exactly. So if we could focus maybe on some more quantitative work, that would help us.
We'd be happy to
analyze
provide
it.
information on the wages paid to each one of the temps on an annualized basis, which I'm sure is in the tens of millions of dollars.
Okay. And also, if you have the data on how many have degrees and what they do, if they do have degrees, what are their current positions,
okay.
et cetera. Thank you.
Can I make a suggestion? Should this council decide to table this in the interest of having more information, certainly OGS and staff to the council can serve as a clearinghouse, which is not to say questions can't go direct to any of the folks that have participated, but OGS would be happy to distribute those questions out, because it sounds like there may be questions that aren't formulated yet that may be me driving some of this. I think from OGS staff's perspective, we would like to know what are the questions that have to be answered to be able to facilitate a vote, should there be a tabling, right? So we're in discussion on the motion to table. Is there anyone who wants to raise a question or comment about tabling? Pravina.
So my question is, and I think you alluded to it before, you mentioned it before, I should say, that we're putting a motion for November 8th for more data, but is it meaning with not a new application? And I think one of the crux points is, if there was a new application, and I'm asking OGS procedurally, is there a way to fast track that to address the concerns, which is this may take months or years, and I guess the MTA contract is coming up. I don't know what date that is, but also knowing that reference point, but also saying, is it within the Procurement Council's purview to actually just accept a preferred source without a new application, or how does a new application work? And if we could actually get an expedited application, if that would also help alleviate, because I do think the working group spent an inordinate amount of time on trying to come on this, and I don't know if getting them all back on the phone for another 2 hours, first they might not like any of us after that one, but but asking them to sit there and go over an issue that they went over for 14 hours may not prevail any new information by November. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the response is twofold. So there's not a mechanism without an application to do a new description or a new classification of service. That said, if an application came into us and it met the requirements, ideally it would go to both of us at the same time. In the interest of time, and I think there would be some options to go through that and make it a priority. I just put the caution on there that assumes a successful review against our 10 criteria and also your criteria. So that is a process that has to be gone through. So the most successful applications would be ones that met those criteria right out of the gate. I don't know how else to answer that. In the absence of an application, I can't promise that it can be expedited, but I can certainly promise that we make it a priority. It certainly sounds like a priority for the council. So,
Could I just voice a concern on that? Because the 45-day timeline would actually be this Friday, I believe, for a November 8th, and I believe the backup date's November 9th, so there's not much of a buffer there. Would there be any ability to be granted an extension if that were the route to be taken here on a formal application?
So on a formal application, obviously the goal is to go through that and have it be successful and not have to wait for the next procurement council into next year. So I think if the issue was the difference of some short number of days, I can see that, but I think our concern is going to be how close does that date get to the next procurement council meeting to make sure that ESD and OGS have time to review it. So if we can, I think if that was the approach, we would want to know what the date was so that we could dedicate resources. And certainly I think OGS and ESD would need at least 30 days to go through it. At least that's my reaction today. I haven't had a chance to talk to Pravina or to the team yet. So if we can leave that open, I think the answer is we would do everything in our power to facilitate it. It's just there is a real thing of having to go through the application.
No, and we'd be reasonable and work cooperatively, no doubt.
Yeah, so let's leave, if we can, leave that soft right now, but the answer is not no. Okay. Is that fair? And I just, in deference to my team, I haven't had a chance to talk to them yet to find out.
I mean, another option, I mean, if the council members wanted to issue, you know, clarification questions to us in writing prior to the next meeting, we'd be happy to answer, whether it be qualitative or quantitative.
Okay. Margaret, Tom. Margaret, you first.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of rewind the tape a little bit here for us all, because I think there's a few issues on the table. One is we were trying to come to a reasonable definition of something that was an office temp. We understand that there are stranded problems with that. People who are in jobs that, you know, currently were assumed under a title similar to that. I would urge the group not to think of moving off that title. I appreciate, Stephen, your comment that it was a well-done definition. I think we should appreciate that work that is done. However, if we can peel aside the other question, which is, you know, what's the other problem we're trying to solve, I would like to not try to solve it through this particular definition, but there may be some other avenues that we could explore apart from the definitional one. Now, one option, of course, and that's what we've been discussing, is to put other service offerings up. And I think, you know, certainly we're in favor of that, because my office is certainly in favor of looking for every opportunity for our disabled to have good employment. And, you know, it would certainly encompass the question of higher level skilled people. It would certainly encompass the other kinds of job opportunities. But the timing then is the question. I'm just not myself aware of what you're talking about with respect to the MTA contract, for instance. Is that kind of a one-off that could be handled? Certainly we have the executive that can, you know, create some policy decisions in that regard that might be helpful. I don't know. I know my colleague from OPWDD, of course, is very concerned. I would think that that agency would also have a priority in, you know, in its hiring and its procurement of these kinds of jobs. And, you know, those, again, there may be other avenues besides this definitional one that I just want to make sure people aren't too, you know, that we don't go away feeling like, well, we have to solve this definition, or we have to broaden it or narrow it or get to another one, that there might be some other avenues as well.
Okay, Tom?
Tom Epson from SUNY. Is, in coming back November 8th, do these two existing definitions have to remain, or if NYSED were to offer a revised definition to what they have here, is that acceptable procedurally? I don't know.
So, without returning to the work group, right? The work group definition would remain the same.
Right. Yes.
The alternate definition can be brought forward, but in whatever format it's in. Certainly, we would have an expectation of wanting to have it soon enough for all of the council members to go through it, and to sort of navigate those questions that they had about it. Ultimately, the procedure is someone on the council would have to carry a motion for an alternate version, right? So, and in fact, that's the same for the work group version. Is someone, and right now someone has, but someone on the council would have to carry any motion to this group and put that on the table and get a second in order for an alternate version to be considered.
Okay, but the alternate version needs to be the one that's been presented to the council now?
I don't I believe that is the alternate outcome of the work group. I don't think that has to stay the same, does it? No. So the alternate version could be changed. The work group report would not change, right? Unless the work group was reconvened. But to some extent, I think we end up at the same place that way.
Right. And the alternate, if there was an alternate, based on the questions that are submitted from the council to OGS and then to NYSED, if NYSED were to come up with an alternate, it would need to be forwarded by a procurement council member. So that's what I'm hearing?
Yes. So any motion, and it would be a motion, to
okay,
right, and that's basically the mechanism. It would have ideally it would get to staff to the council in enough time to distribute it.
Okay, that's I understand the motion part. I thought was asking, you don't have to, NYSED would just present it to staff of the council. And
yeah, whatever the mechanism was, but in order to be considered for a vote,
right,
a member of the council would have to motion for it to be considered for a vote. Okay? So there's a motion on the table, there's a motion in front of us to table, before I use the same word 11 times in the same sentence. Are there any other comments about tabling before I hold a vote on tabling? Okay. Lisa seconded it to table.
I'm sorry, I know you want to hurry up. So I just want to clarify that if it's tabled, I'm hoping that we can table it long enough to get something else in place so the people who have an opportunity to work in the types of jobs that wouldn't be covered by this great definition, that's nothing against the definition at all, we just want to be sure that the transition is seamless. So so if we pass it today, for example, if we pass it today, tomorrow somebody may approach Goodwill or NYSED directly for some type of job that doesn't meet this definition, and there won't be an avenue in place to hire them. So that's what I think I just want to, have a comfort level that we do have some mechanism in place that individuals with disabilities won't lose out on a job tomorrow or any time in between today deciding to move forward with this definition and whenever the group can come up with another definition and vote on it. Thank you.
Sure. And I think so the general peril of this process is if we weren't talking about temporary office personnel, if we were talking about something separate, a service that hadn't been considered before this council yet, there is always that situation. There is a commodity that employed disabled individuals, or there is a service that employed them, that if it hadn't been considered by this council, that would not be an opportunity. If it was, so if an application came in tomorrow or an opportunity came in tomorrow for a service that wasn't approved, that would be true. So this situation creates that same peril no matter what the definition is. I understand what you're saying. I just broadly, there's no mechanism to completely prevent that under the current operating rules for the council and the way the program's structured. Okay. Any other comments about the motion to table? Are there any other procedural questions? Does everybody understand what they're voting on? Okay. So I'm calling for a vote on the motion to table. All in favor of tabling this to November 8th, please raise your hand and keep them up so that staff can count. Okay. Can you guys see? Is everybody comfortable with me just letting them count and not reading them out? Okay. I counted 11. Did you guys count 11? Yes. Okay. All opposed? Please put your hand up. You count 6 there? Okay. Any abstentions? There's no recusals on this vote, right? Okay. And just for purposes of quorum and for full count, I believe Ron is no longer at his chair. Okay? And Mary Beth is present, though, so it comes out even. Sorry, Mary Beth. Okay, so my understanding is there's 11 votes to table, so the motion to table passes. This will, based on the language of the tabling motion, this will be on the list to be revisited on November 8th at the next Procurement Council meeting, okay? Procedurally, if folks are not sending questions directly to NYSID or to the work group, OGS would be happy to operate as a facilitator for that. That way, if any council members ask questions, those answers can be distributed to the entire council and everybody can have the benefit of that. Other than that, after that, there is open council discussion on the agenda. Does anyone have another topic they would like to raise for the Procurement Council this afternoon? Alex.
Thank you. So I will be quick. Alex Green, Chamber, and we'll defer to the council staff to decide on how to move forward and, if necessary, incorporate this into future meetings. But based on the discussion regarding the medicine cups earlier, it dawned on me that there's been some institutional changes in the state over the past few years that may require additional representatives to be added to the council. Specifically, in determining the feasibility legally, whether it's statutorily, regulatorily, or administratively, will defer to council staff. But specifically, the addition of a representative from the SDVOB program, specifically, and also a representative from the ESD's Division of Minority and Women Business Development, which approximately 1 year ago was removed from under the Small Businesses Services Division, which is Pravina's group, and put into its own separate and independent division. So the MWBE division is no longer under business services, and as a result, you have 2 independent autonomous bodies within ESD. And based on today's discussion, it would be, I think, in all of our benefit to have a representative from the MWBE division participating on the council as well.
Okay, so instructions to staff to please take that as a takeaway for discussion. I don't offhand know the mechanisms for that,
Absolutely.
but we'll take that as a staff instruction to get back to the council on. There's no motion for action right now, right? You need more information.
Exactly,
Okay.
just to determine the feasibility, and then we can move forward.
Great. So we will get back to you on that, but if we could make sure we put it in the minutes that that's a staff takeaway, that would be great. Okay?
And also if the update could come during the November 8th meeting.
Great.
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else? Open business. Going once? Going twice? I feel like I'm in auction where I'm not being sold at it. No? Okay. So with that said, the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 8th, 2017. The alternate date is, I believe, November 9th. And that was done specifically because we are now coming into that holiday period. It does make the 45-day period for consideration of new applications short. So just for any preferred sources, please be aware of those timing issues in terms of having applications into the organization. If there are any that are pending, please let us know about any of the timings so that we can make sure that we do the best we can to accommodate them. With that, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn, Margaret, second. Okay, great. Sorry, I saw hands. Okay, all in favor of adjourning, please say aye. All opposed? All abstentions? Hearing none, this meeting of the Procurement Council is adjourned, and we look forward to seeing everybody in November. Thank you.